All right, welcome everybody to this panel discussion. My name is Sarah Young. I'm the development manager from Nuzzles & Co. in Park City, Utah. And we're so glad that you bought a ticket to watch this beautiful movie. And we have a wonderful panel tonight here to talk a little bit more and get a little bit more in depth about the film and some of the issues surrounding animal welfare, how this movie relates to what we experience in our community. So I'm going to go ahead and let our panelists introduce themselves. We have one of our panelists is in true 2020 and 2021 fashion is running a little bit late, so she'll be joining us. I'm going to start with the director of the movie, which we are so privileged to have with us today, Elizabeth Lowe, if you wouldn't mind giving a brief introduction.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Lowe. I'm the director, cinematographer, and editor of Stray, and I'm so excited to be on this panel with Nuzzles & Co.
Thank you so much. And then we also have Tamara Gray, who is our board president at Nuzzles & Co. If you wouldn't mind saying a few sentences as well.
Yes, I am really honored to be involved. I've been with Nuzzles for about 5.5 years, and this movie just hit home. I lived in Turkey for about 3 years, and so I've really seen it firsthand. And so I'm really excited to be involved. Thank you for including me.
Thanks, Tamara. And then we also have Dr. Alyssa Hughes. She's our medical director at Nuzzles & Co. Let you introduce yourself.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm Alyssa. I've also been with Nuzzles since about 2014. And, I've been a veterinarian since 2008 and done some private practice stuff, but shelter medicine is just my true love. And I'm so excited to be part of this organization. And this film was really extraordinary. And so I'm looking forward to the panel. Thanks.
Thank you all so much. And I think we have our fourth panelist that's joining us in just a minute. But I'm going to go ahead and we're going to jump into some questions. I first really want to hear from Elizabeth. Can you tell us what drew you to dogs?
I think probably like everyone on this panel and everyone watching this film, I am a dog lover. I was born that way. And it was my childhood dog, I think, that inspired me wanting to make this film. He had passed away, and that made me want to make a film that centered its narrative around a dog's life, to pay attention to lives that are not usually considered significant enough for a story or a film or a book. And that's what led me to the Stray Dogs of Turkey.
What kind of challenges did you face in centering, dogs as your main subject for a film? Or benefits?
I think before I headed out there, people were really frightened for me. They were like, what are you going to do with the packs of stray dogs? Like, what if they bite you? But when I got out there, the stray dogs there, because they're so incorporated into the urban fabric of Istanbul, they were just so incredibly well socialized. They could read human cues so easily. So filming with dogs was really easy. One of the problems we did come across was that dogs tended to bond with us and our crew over time. And so inevitably they would end up following us back instead of sort of fulfilling the promise of the film, which was we would follow a dog on his or her journey, and we would see where that would take us to envelop ourselves in a non-human will and not have my desires be imposed on their stories. So Zeytin, the star of the film, actually was one of the few rare dogs who didn't do that. She was very stubborn and very independent. And so, my camera could be so close to her and she would sort of not engage in the way that other dogs would. And she allowed us to follow her throughout Istanbul. And that's sort of what made the film, her independence.
That's awesome. I'm sure we've all experienced a dog or a cat following us after being bonded with. Do you think, is that the reason why you decided to follow Zeytin and the other dogs? Because it was easier for them not to bond with you?
I think it was also their relationship that they had with the young men from Syria who were sharing the streets with them. I think as stray dogs, they don't have access to private spaces. And so they're constantly occupying public spaces in a city. And so the people that they encountered, whether it was women marching for their rights on the streets or the refugees from Syria who were trying to make a living there. I think those on and off again relationships as they wove through the city was what struck me a lot. So that's how they sort of emerged as the star of the film, as the stars of the film.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I am kind of wondering, I want to ask you what it was like filming in Turkey, and then maybe Tamara, you can jump in and talk a little bit about your experience living in Turkey as well.
Yeah, it's so exciting to hear, Tamara, that you lived there for 3 years. What a privilege. I feel so jealous of everyone who has a real connection there and who gets to live there. Because every day I would walk out of my hostel where I was living, and there would be dogs there, or I would find Zeytin and Nazar because I was tracking them with GPS trackers that I would put on them at the end of the day of the shoots, so that overnight I'd be able to see where they were and then find them the next morning. And I think filming in Turkey was just so interesting because it was completely foreign to me. The idea that stray animals were embraced, that they weren't seen as a problem, and that they were communally sort of taken care of by people and also the government. Like when I would try to put collars on the dogs, people would actually be really, to track them, people would be really alarmed. They would step in and be very protective of the dogs. And I found that very striking. And on also that there are these laws in Turkey that I can't imagine passing in America, though I would hope that you're not allowed to euthanize any stray dogs. You can't even hold them in captivity if they're a healthy stray dog. And if you pick them up to vaccinate them, you have to return them to the place where they were picked up. So there's this profound level of respect written into the legal code of that country that I was really struck by and wanted to share with audiences by making this film.
Thank you. Yeah, it is really striking how the animals are treated with such dignity throughout the whole film. Tamara, do you want to tell us about your time in Turkey?
Yeah, the exciting thing for me is to see the way Turkey has changed. I lived there when I was young. My father was a fighter pilot in the Air Force. And so I had the opportunity to live in Adana at Incirlik Air Force Base. And we lived in downtown Adana, Turkey for about a year. At that point, it was a different time when stray dogs were not taken care of and they were treated with cruelty, and they were treated, people were afraid of them and they ran from them, and they were not kind at all. And so when I read the synopsis of this film, I thought, oh my gosh, finally something amazing, because I've always loved animals. And Turkey, when I lived in Turkey, was a completely different environment than it is now. I have visited it since as an adult several times because I am drawn to it. And I've seen a lot of changes back then when I was very young. The changes. I was very young. I was 10 to 13 when I lived in Turkey. So a long time ago. And the changes are amazing and the changes are profound. And to me, they just strike such a chord in my heart of the amazing things that I think we can do here in the United States to adopt some of the same respect for animals and the way they live their lives. So thank you so much, Elizabeth, for doing this. It was such a great journey home for me.
That's amazing to hear that like 30 years ago or however long ago it was a different situation. And that's incredibly hopeful for me to hear that a society can collectively change in their attitude towards animals. And I actually have just heard that they're passing laws 2 weeks from now in Turkey, unanimous, that all the politicians agree on. And one of those laws is they're instituting sort of a ministry of education for sympathy, teaching sympathy to young kids at a school level, building that into the curriculum so that animal welfare and sensitivity to non-human rights is sort of educated from a young age.
That's incredible. That's so exciting. How exciting.
Tamara, would you also tell us a little bit about Nuzzles & Co. and kind of what we do and how it compares to what is being done in Turkey?
I'd be happy to. So Nuzzles & Co. is a nonprofit animal rescue based out of Park City, Utah. Actually in Piowa is where we're based. And we protect the animals across the Wasatch Front and back. Our mission is to protect them and to provide a loving and nurturing place for them where they can be healthy, they can learn positive behaviors, and they can even find loving homes for each and every animal. We also work really closely, which I think is something that Elizabeth has touched on the importance of education and learning how to humanely treat animals, how to care for them and love them and welcome them into the society that we live in. We've learned that helping the animals in this way, we actually are the ones that benefit. Human beings benefit as much, if not more, than the animals. And by giving them a second chance at life and helping them find loving homes, we're able to give back 100-fold in that instance. So we're really excited to be part of a community that loves and cares for animals. And that's something that we want to continue to spread across any of the communities that we're involved in. And we hope that we can continue with this nationwide movement to start treating animals with respect and loving and caring for them.
Thank you. That's awesome. Really quickly, Sunday's Hunt is with us. She's our other panelist. Sunday's Hunt is the Utah State Director of the Humane Society of America. I hope I got that right. Let's move on to Dr. Hughes. I'd really love to hear some of your thoughts on the film, a little bit of your personal experience with veterinary care and how you think it relates.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, it was really interesting to see. Obviously, both Tamara and Elizabeth have spoken about like the way the dogs were sort of incorporated into an urban society. And I personally have not done a ton of international veterinary travel. Most of my sort of free roaming dog population and cat population experiences on the native reservations in southern Utah and parts of Arizona. And so it's a little bit more of like a rural setting than this kind of urban thing. But basically it's fascinating how when you see sort of the volume of dogs in this area and just how they're kind of like walking around, obviously Nuzzles and Co's, we are big proponents of doing spay and neuter, and some of the numbers that can kind of come out of just like one dog being allowed to have many, many puppies, and how that can sort of balloon. I mean, most people aren't aware of how young dogs and cats can reproduce and how many puppies and kittens they can produce in a year. And so, that's one of the big things that we're trying to sort of do is help people, access spay and neuter when they can't necessarily afford private practice prices, and get, help for feral or free roaming cat populations in Utah. So, I can't say that I have like a personal exact experience with seeing them walk around a city, but it was very, very cool to see how everyone in the city sort of, I just noticed like people would reach their hand down and kind of stroke the dog's head absentmindedly as they were sort of passing by. And, people were introducing their toddlers to the kids. And it was clear that there was definitely like a large amount of affection and sort of love for them. And like you mentioned, Elizabeth, they're completely incorporated, and just like it's almost like they think they're part of the people, like they're just walking around feeling like they're part of that community. So I guess other things that we do at Nuzzles, and sort of the things that we're sort of trying to educate the community and the public about are just as much as Elizabeth's film was really beautiful, like stray animals have an incredibly tough life. They think that the lifespan of these dogs and cats, at least in the United States, is probably like about 2 to 3 years, just because they're, poor nutrition in some situations, infectious diseases, and then trauma, hit by a car, some of in the more rural areas being predated on by wild animals. So as beautiful as it was to watch these dogs, it sort of also made me think, gosh, she's probably, she is going to have a shortened lifespan compared to the pets that probably most of us know and love, who may live to be 12 to 14 kind of years old. So that's another reason why, we also are trying to help get dogs spayed and neutered into homes and stuff so that they can live their fullest life and not have to have such a tough sort of like, just really, really have to work for themselves every single day fighting to stay alive.
Thank you, Dr. Hughes. It kind of seems like I keep coming back to this thought with this movie of that having a healthy and well taken care of animal population contributes to the health of everybody and human beings and our society as a whole. From a medical standpoint, can you tell us a little bit more about that? I know that you can speak more than all of us about zoonotic diseases and how healthy animals make healthy people.
Yeah, I mean, there's like, obviously zoonotic diseases, which if people don't know that term, it just basically means an infectious disease that can be communicated between both animals and humans. And so some of those are going to be more, minor, like some types of intestinal parasites or some bacterial illnesses. Probably like the major one that is a big concern worldwide would be rabies. That is not as much of a concern in the US, but I know that in India and parts of Africa, and there's several other countries where it is a huge problem, that many, many, many people die each year from rabies. And I think most of those are from dog bites. And so obviously the dogs in this film were very comfortable with humans and seemed very non-threatening. But I don't think that that's necessarily always the case, because they're sort of fighting to survive. And, as humans, we're not always interacting with dogs in a level that they feel is safe. So they're trying to protect themselves. So that would be one way in which animals can sort of affect the community that we're like living in as humans. And then there's also the environmental impact. There's dog and cat waste that can have an impact on the water supply. Dogs and cats are predator species, and so they're going to also try to fight for food. And so, there's areas where native species have been, are on the decline because of an overpopulation of domesticated animals like dogs and cats. So those are the sort of the main issues. And then, of course, I know that there are some communities in which dogs and cats are seen as a nuisance, in getting into gardens, killing people's chickens or livestock or other means of that they may be making their living. So those are some of like the more negative ways we could see them impacting our communities. Of course, I know not all of us necessarily see that because we're animal lovers, but sort of taking it back from like a community perspective.
Thank you, Dr. Hughes. I think my question for all of you is, what do you think the impact would be if the U.S. implemented these more progressive policies that helped these animals have a better, way of life? Elizabeth, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't know how it would be implemented in the US, but to me, I mean, it's really interesting to hear Alyssa's feedback and also her assessment based on having worked in the medical industry around animals for so long. For me, I often feel like that old sort of saying that like a dog knows who's good to it and who is not, and they treat you likewise. I feel like the temperament of dogs, whether they're seen as nuisances or whether they're become threats, is very much sort of a reflection of the human society that they're a part of and how humans treat them. Because in Istanbul, they're treated so well, the dogs were very well socialized. And we would go to more remote parts of Turkey where there maybe was less of a close relationship with the dogs. And you could see that in the behavior of the dogs and their temperament. But to me, it feels like dogs are such a reflection of us because they evolved with us, that it's so up to us how they behave around us. And yeah, in terms of whether it could be implemented in the US, I think of it as a completely cultural issue, that because in the West, I think we conceive of it as a problem, and that there isn't this recognition of dogs being able to survive and live life on their own terms, or to live on our peripheries and off of our trash, which is what sort of they evolved to do, that we don't tolerate it. And I would love to see an experiment in a city, like one of the cities in the US, to implement a program where to see if you could have stray dogs living instead of languishing in cells and shelters, or being put to death, which so many millions are. Even if they may have briefer lives, it's still more glorious to be on the streets and to be allowed to live freely than to be in prison just by virtue of being a dog in our society. Those are my thoughts, and maybe they're a little bit radical. So I'd love to hear what Tamara and Alyssa think of this.
I mean, me personally, I agree with you. I think that unfortunately in the United States, and I've lived all over the world, I've had the opportunity to live all over the world and see different cultures and how they interact with their animals. And for some reason in the United States, I don't know why, we seem to think that they are ours to own. They are our possession and we get to own them, whether we buy them or we breed them or we rescue them, whatever we do. we are their saviors. And sometimes I look at my animals. I have 4 dogs and I love every one of them, and they are my savior. I love those animals and they give me such a sense of peace. And I look when I'm often out in Salt Lake, downtown Salt Lake, and you'll see communities of homeless people and they have their animals. And many of those people would rather sleep on the street than go stay at a hotel that might accept them if that hotel will not accept their animals. So that love and that respect, I think it is something we could strive for. I just feel like we have, exactly to your point, Elizabeth, a different cultural barrier that makes us again feel like for some reason they need to be ours to own, and they can't survive on their own. When I first saw this movie, I thought, oh, this will be so sad. And as I started watching it, I thought, this is so amazing. Look at these animals and how people interact with them. And especially having seen how people interacted with animals, because rabies was a significant issue 35 years ago when I lived in Turkey. It's a complete different level of respect and a level of wanting to interact with them, just wanting to pet their head, just wanting to say hello. And I loved that. And I would love to see that we could get there. I don't know that we ever will, sadly, just because of our cultural approach to it.
Yeah.
Alyssa, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that I have anything major to add to that. I mean, I definitely, there's been a lot of research done to how well animals socialize to humans based on sort of this very early period of their lives that they call this period where they can be imprinted. And I do think that there's, it's a very short window. It's a little bit longer with dogs, but even up to a period of, 6 to 7 months. That's not an exact quote, but an estimate, where if they don't have a lot of interaction with humans, it's really hard to train them to be comfortable with us. And so there certainly are, I think the way we've done it in the US with the free roaming cat populations has really been sort of a compassionate move to understanding that some cats, no matter what, if they look exactly like your little cute fluffy tabby that you have sitting next to you, on your desk, that they don't feel that way about you. They don't understand that we're there to take care of them in the capacity that, as US citizens, we sort of picture them to be in our home and sitting next to us on the bed. And so it is the more humane thing to allow them to live their life as a free roaming cat. And obviously we don't have that with dogs either, but at Nuzzles, we definitely see some really under socialized dogs that are just terrified. And, I like to think that some part of them understands that we're really trying to help them, but I also think there's this fundamental, just way of being that they just were not exposed to humans, kind humans, or any humans for that matter, at an early enough age, and that they are more comfortable out, in the desert, or, tucked under some rock, or even in the back of a gas station where they can remain 50 feet from the nearest human if that's what's comfortable for them.
Absolutely. Thank you all for your thoughts. It's such a complicated issue, and it's so much more than just the health of animals. It's our society and our culture that requires a lot of conversation. And so I hope Sundays, are you able to hear us now?
I am. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I'm so glad you're here.
Going to what Elisa just said, I have to say that I have had the fortune of fostering a whole host of animals from different shelters across the state. And it has been so thrilling to me to see them come from a reservation, that walking into a home and just being in awe at walls and smelling paint and the TV being on and any kind of interaction, to another dog that who knows what the background and what happened to this poor little frail, unbelievable little love, where she eventually came out of her shell. But initially, she couldn't stand the thought of touch, of any kind of human interaction at all. And seeing them evolve and change as they've become safe and secure and know the loving hand of a human. It's just been really thrilling.
Thanks, Sundays. I think that's an important, I think you touch a lot on the symbiotic relationship of humans and dogs. And that's, I think we've evolved with them to need that. So it is beautiful. Sundays, now that you're here, want to ask you really quick if you can kind of fill us in your thoughts on animal welfare in the US and animal legislation and kind of how it compares to Turkey and some of the things that we see in the film. We're running a little short on time, but if you can tell us quickly.
You bet. As the Utah State Director, my biggest role in the state is to try to pass animal welfare laws that will provide them protection. And so 3 of which I've been working on just this session is banning the use of gas chambers, a pet store ban bill that should help all the shelters and rescue. It's really a community resource, as well as an egg confinement for laying hens. But that question, the US, obviously, we've come so far in addressing how animal welfare and animal legislation in general, and how it compares to Turkey. It's really interesting because we've got such an animal overpopulation, and we know there are countries like Turkey with overpopulation of cats and dogs. In fact, in many of my travel, one of the hardest things that I experience is going back to a fine hotel, but during the day being out and about and seeing all of the poverty and the stray animals. And so this film touched me in such a way that was really personal, because there are countries like Turkey that are going to solve these problems. And our Humane Society International branch, we're actively working to reduce overpopulation through spay and neuter and vaccination programs. And in the US, the quality of life for street dogs while placing in animals in shelters is obviously a strategy used here for many decades. This isn't really as viable or even necessary as we're seeing in this film in Turkey, in these other regions. And so while we can address overpopulation and elevate the care of street dogs and cats much faster by getting to the root cause of the problem through spay and neuter services, robust rabies vaccination services, I feel like this film really honed in on how the people treat these animals. And that was what was so touching to me.
Thank you so much, Sundays. Yeah, I think it's really about that cultural shift. It's not just about policy. It's not just about laws that we can enact. It's about people making that shift in their heart of how they're going to treat animals and how we feel about them in our society. Thank you so much. We're actually almost out of time. Thank you everyone for joining our panel today. It was really, you all have so much expertise, and this film was it's such a wonderful catalyst for conversation. Thank you, Elizabeth. I want to send my last question to Elizabeth and ask you, we're talking a lot about the US, we're, reaching to US audiences and audiences in Utah. If there's one thing that you would want them to take away from the film, what would it be?
I think this discussion has been so interesting because I feel like we have opinions that are challenging each other about the idea around stray animals. And for me, I think I applaud sort of Sundays for your work in legislating on behalf of animals, because on the policy level, that's so important. I think what I would love people to take away from the film, and maybe this goes against some of what people are saying, is I hope the film functions as kind of a decolonizing tool to make us question how animals are treated in our own communities. That, at least for me, my journey through Istanbul and Turkey and how I made the film, originally I went into it also feeling like this was going to be a film about stray dogs and how much they survive without love or security on the streets. But over the few years that I filmed, I really came away feeling the opposite, that actually these dogs, in the laws that are there to protect them, are able to thrive and live even what felt like long lives. Because I saw a lot of older dogs on the streets, and even if their lives are a little bit shorter than pets, that they're at least allowed to be given a chance to live as they all deserve to, just from being sentient beings. And I hope that the film sort of offers a different sort of vision of what relating to another species can be like, and maybe redefining our relationship to dogs, not necessarily conceiving of them as a problem if they can be healthily integrated into a city and live freely while still being cared for, even if they're not owned. So that was my personal journey. But of course, there are many different perspectives about this issue, and I think all of us are doing great work on behalf of dogs.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you for making this film that really is the catalyst for so much thought and conversation on such a complex thing that's going on in our society and is really a global issue. That is all the time that we have for this discussion. Thank you again to Elizabeth Lowe, Tamara Gray, Dr. Alyssa Hughes, and Sundays Hunt. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for supporting Nuzzles & Co. through watching this video. If you'd like to donate, you can go to nuzzlesandco.org. And thank you so much, and have a great evening.
So much.
Thank you. Goodbye.